Hey everyone, in this video I will teach you everything that you need to know about the skills of an Ebonsong. We start with an overview of the skill tree, its skills and ancestrals, and the most important combo effects. After that we will break down our burst combo and see what we can do to maximize our damage. Okay, so first of all let's have a look at the overview of a skill tree of an Ebonsong. We obviously have Archery, we have Shadowplay, we have Songcraft. We start with Archery. We have endless arrows, which you will be using most of the time. This is your gap filler if you don't have anything else on cooldown. And this is also really important in PvE because it has a slow combo. Now, you want to make sure in PvE to use this together with Gale Charge Bolt because this has a far lower cooldown than the regular version. So it has a 6-second cooldown, it applies 3-second bleed. So 50% of the time you'll be benefiting from plus 35% extra damage on slow targets with the endless arrow. This is your single target PvE rotation. Most of the time you'll just be using these two skills. Now endless arrows has two ancestrals. It has their flame one, which I believe is better for high ping players who don't have crazy attack speed because the global cooldown doesn't matter as much. This is more damage per shot, but it also fires far less shots. Then there's also the stone version, which is great for PvE and PvP, especially in raid v raid, because this is an AoE endless arrows. It hits your target and up to 5 targets around it in a 5-meter radius, so this is really good for a clump. This drains your mana, however. This has very high mana use, so you want to make sure to pay attention to your mana. Now we have Charge Bolt. Charge Bolt, the Gale version, in my opinion, is only for PvE. You never want to use the Flame version as an Ebonsong because that requires you to go within 19 meters of range, which you don't want to do. For PvP, you want to use the regular version. The regular version has incredible damage output. It has the slow debuff, and it also gets a huge damage buff for shooting someone that is bleeding. It also increases the silence on targets, which is really nice because as an Ebonsong you want to take out healers. You have your concussive arrow, which applies a silence, which you can extend using Charge Bolt. And you also have steady shooting. This is one of the most important skills. This is unlike, for example, Freerunner, not a skill which you tap once and it's active. This is a skill you tap once, it goes active, and either it runs out because you've been using it for 30 seconds, or you can manually disable it. Get used to manually disabling this, because this skill makes you incredibly squishy. Only use this aggressively, because if you read the description it says decreases shield block, parry and evasion minus 100%. So while this is active, you're not going to be blocking anything, especially if an enemy archer is attacking you. You want to disable this right away, because he's just going to eat through your health. Only use this aggressively. If you get jumped, disable this right away. What this also does is it gives you increased critical damage, so it boosts your damage. A little bit of focus, which isn't a lot honestly. But what this also does is it turns your blazing arrow into a triple blazing arrow. So instead of getting one charge, you can actually use it 3 times in a row. While this is active, blazing arrow cooldown gets increased. So the quicker you disable it because you don't use it anymore, the faster you can use a triple blazing combo again. And you also have Fending Arrow. Fending Arrow, in my opinion, is only something for like 1v1s or very small scale PvP, because this pushes enemy away from you. This is mostly for, I would say, fighting melees. This also interrupts cast time, so you can use it to interrupt a arc lightning or something else. And then also gets a combo with Stalker's Mark, so it increases the pushback. Personally, I've never been using it. But I'm pretty sure this is very useful if you're fighting a lot of melees in 1v1s. So coming to the second row, we have Blazing Arrow. This is our main burst damage, or part of our main damage burst rotation. It applies light blindness and decreases magic accuracy, but that is not the important piece. The important piece is the green text. It has a 100% increased critical rate on top of your already high critical rate as an archer. So no matter how much resilience your enemy has, this skill will always crit. This is why it is so useful, especially with steady shooting, because it increases your critical damage. This will always crit. Now, if you apply Stalker's Mark before Blazing Arrow, the very first blazing arrow will always apply a bleed. Now, the nice thing about it is it also has a combo that deals additional damage to bleeding targets. So the second and the third blazing arrow will actually get a higher damage output because the target is bleeding. It also has an AoE effect with snipe, which means if you sniped enemies and you blazing arrow the same enemy, everyone around in a 5-meter radius who was also sniped, he will also get hit by the blazing arrow. I will show you a video clip of it. Pay attention to it. The blazing arrow, I fire 3 blazing arrows and it's basically hitting 9 targets. Then we also have snare. Personally, I find snare very useful, but only in combination with Deadeye. Snare is an AoE snare around you, but it actually becomes a ranged snare which you can use on your mouse location, so you can snare people from far away. Pay attention, this is not a 7.4 second snare, this is only 3.7. Yeah, 3.7, because it's minus 50% duration in PvP. But this is also a very nice skill if you want to take out people from a fight, and this combos very well with snipe, because if you snipe a snare target, they actually get tripped. Deadeye is a must-have. You use it once, it is active for 1 minute, it has a 1 minute 20 second cooldown, so you're only not having it for 20 seconds if you keep using it the moment it goes back on cooldown. This essentially, as long as you're moving and you're not stopping, gives you up to 3000 defense penetration. This is a lot, this is free damage, you always want to make sure to spec this. And you have Concussive Arrow, which also has Ancestrals. Now the basic version gets defense penetration combo, which is really nice for our main rotation, because our main rotation is applying bleed with Blazing Arrow followed up by a Charged Bolt and extending the silence from Charged Bolt with from Concussive Arrow, with Charged Bolt. So Concussive Arrow is a very high damage skill. It is a casted skill, but you can remove the cast time using double recurve. Now this is very high damage output. It silences the enemy for 3.5 seconds. Cloth users usually have it far less because they get reduction from silence, but this basically renders your target unable to heal itself, open up a glider, call a mount. This is what silence does. It also does extra damage to snare targets, so you might want to combo this. This also destroys boneyards and cannot be evaded, blocked or parried, so this is a guaranteed hit on your enemy. Charge Bolt has 2 Ancestrals. The missed one you don't want to use at all, this one is trash. And you have the flame version. This one is a channeled version, it doesn't get the bleed death pen combo, but it has far higher damage. If you fully charge it, you can choose how much you want to charge it. You can charge it halfway up or all the way. The only reason I find this really good is the moment you can use it, it doesn't matter how far your enemy runs away. If you started casting it and your enemy sloth backdrops, goes on a mount, he's 100 meters away, it doesn't matter. As long as you started the cast while he was in range, this will fully charge up and it will follow him all the way around. It doesn't matter if he's 100 or 20 meters away, this will always hit. So this is really nice if people are like gliding away, you can fully charge it and it does a ton of damage. Personally, I use the regular version because most of the time we'll be using Concussive as an instacast, where the damage from a full charged flame Concussive Arrow isn't applied, and we also don't get the bleed combination with Blazing Arrow. Now for the third row we get Hunter's Guile, which is a 10-second long skill which increases your movement speed by 20% if your ranged attack crits an enemy. This is really useful, especially in small scale PvP. It also resets your fending arrow, which is why I believe this is mostly useful for small scale PvE where you're fighting a lot of melees, because this keeps melees away from you. You can actually push them back twice using this combo. Personally, I don't use it because I don't find a 10-second use on a 1-minute cooldown very useful, but that is all entirely up to you. Now you also have double recurve. Double recurve also has 2 Ancestrals. It has the base version, which has 2 charges, which personally I don't use because this one the live version gets 3 charges. It has less critical rate, but that's not a very big drop down. There's also the flame version. This one is basically not a teleport back. This is similar to Hunter's Guard. You use it, it goes active for 20 seconds and increases your critical rate. I don't use this either, because if you use this, you get a 1 minute 30 second cooldown, which means that's 90 seconds. You cannot be insta-casting your concussive arrow, and this can also be used to remove fall damage, similar to backdrop, and this is also a nice escape because it ports you back, let's see, about 15 meters if you use it 3 times in a row. Then we also have Missile Rain. Missile Rain, in my opinion, is incredibly weak in PvP. It doesn't do a lot of damage. What it's really, really good at is killing enemy mounts. So if you want to stop an enemy engage, make sure that, for example, all of the DPS that want to follow up, that are running into your raid, have their mounts killed, so they take a while to engage, or, you know, it does a lot of damage to less HP targets, but it shouldn't be used to actually fire into a clump. I think there's better options for this. This is really useful for PvE, but I don't really see a purpose in it in damage dealing and PvP, although it does have its uses. There's also Ancestrals. I'm using right now the Stone or the Mist version. There's a regular version, which is mostly used to glitch PvE content. There's also a Flame version, which can be used to very quickly kill Rezos and dragons. This is really, really good. Does a lot of damage to really big mounts. Yeah, but this is basically only useful if you're fighting dragons or Rezos. This one, I like it a lot because it kills enemies' mounts. It catches them off guard, but it's not a very high DPS skill. Then you also have Snipe. Snipe has a very nice combo. You can use it to trip targets. You can actually use it for an AoE trip, right? So you can use Deadeye for the ranged snare. You can snare enemies, multiple enemies, for example in a clump, and then you can snipe them. And then you have an AoE snipe, you have an AoE trip, and you possibly also have an AoE blazing arrow. Now, if you've sniped a target, they cannot get sniped again because they get immunity from it, but it also does extra damage to snare targets, so you want to make sure to combo this, especially because snipe is a very, how do I say it? It's a pretty long cast, and if you want to shoot it on a ball, your target might run to the left or right, so by the time your snipe is actually fully charged, it completely misses the clump. So you want to make sure that the target you want to shoot it at is in the clump and is unable to move, so you want to snare him and you want to snipe him, so you're making sure you're actually hitting the clump. This also has 2 Ancestrals. It has the Flame version, which personally I don't have much experience with using, and it also has the Lightning version, which honestly I also don't use a lot, but this one can be channeled, it can be stopped anytime, similar to Flame Concussive. Personally, most of the time I'm using the basic Snipe. Now, what you don't want to forget, obviously, is the passives. You want to make sure what each of them does. For Archery, you get increased movement speed. You're also getting less mana cost while under the effects of Deadeye or Steady Shooting. So you want to make sure Steady Shooting is always up. You also get a sweet spot, and this is very important. You might have noticed already, the further away from your target you are, the more damage you're dealing. If you have a melee jumping you, and you feel like you're not doing any damage at all, that is because you're very close to him and you don't have the distance. So always try to make sure to be at the maximum range from your skills, which should be 28 meters. I think 25 plus the leather passive, 3 meters. So most of your skills, they're going to be 28 meters. This is where your damage is the highest. And you also have Feral Claws, which basically gives you attack speed and a bit of cooldowns. This basically It builds up during a fight. You don't have it right away when engaging an enemy. It is similar to Deadeye, where you actually have to move and every second you get a bit of a stack. It is similar. You also have the skill damage and you have the critical rate. You want to make sure you spend enough points in archery to actually get the last passive, because the 9% crit rate is really important as an archer, because you have a lot of critical damage. But usually, if you pick the mandatory skills in archery, you are always getting the Eagle Guy's passive. Now, what are the most important skills which I find to be used no matter how you would like to play? These are the skills you should always be using. You should be using Endless Arrows, Charge Bolt, Steady Shooting. This is optional in my opinion. Blazing Arrow is mandatory, same as Deadeye. Concussive for the silence and for the silence extend. You also want to make sure to use double recurve, because if you want to use concussive, you also want to use double recurve. And honestly, the other skills you use is up to you. If you want to use Fending Arrow, Hunter's Guile, Snare, Snipe, I would pick, if you pick Snipe, I would definitely also pick Snare. I wouldn't pick one without the other. If you want to pick Fending Arrow, you probably want to make sure to pick Hunter's Guide as well. And depending on the situation, you should choose between picking Missile Rain or not. Okay, so let's get over to Shadowplay. This is a skill tree that will tremendously boost your attack speed and your utility. So we start with the first row. You don't want to pick Rapid Strike because it's useless as an archer. You have Poisoned Weapons, which has ancestral versions. Has a regular version, which is a 9-second code, and during those 9 seconds, if you hit a target, the code disappears and it gets applied to your target. Then you have a flame version, which is only 3 seconds, but it transfers, so it doesn't matter how many enemies you're hitting, it will apply the poison to each and every single of the enemies. This one always only applies poison to one enemy. Then you also have a wave version, which instead of poisoning your enemy, well, it's also poisoning it, but instead of dealing damage over time, it's reducing the evasion of the target. If you want to pick any of these, I would pick these, because for the damage over time from the poison, you don't have enough magic attack. So these two, I wouldn't be picking these. I would be picking these and this one in PvP. Now the only reason you want to pick poison weapons is if you either going to use Pin Down, because Pin Down has a silence in combination with poison. So if you use this, you fire a few arrows on your enemy, he's poisoned, and you use Pin Down, you actually get a silence on it. Honestly, most of the time you will not be using this, but for small scale maybe. You also have an equivalent in Shadow Smite. Shadow Smite also has Ancestrals, where I would only be using the regular version. This one teleports you back behind the enemies, but this is only nice for melee, so get a lot of backstab. Pick the regular version. This one is a shackle, so it disables all of the physical attacks, which is really nice against melees, especially if you look at the duration. This is a 5.7 second shackle on your enemy. This is very long. This can be very useful in small scale and large scale PvP. If you have a melee jumping you and you cannot escape, you can at least disable the skills. Then you also have Backdrop, which can be used as an escape or to negate fall damage. You have Overwhelm, which I'm a really big fan of. I will show you a few clips of why I believe this is very useful, especially because you need a filler to actually get these two skills. So this one basically leaps over your target. You can use it while you're on a mount. If you target someone who is on a mount, if you overwhelm him, he's going to drop off the mount. That is usually quicker than getting off your own mount and killing the mount. This is always quicker to just overwhelm someone off the mount to make sure you can actually attack him. This also, if you use a dive bomb glider, or even if you use a mount, you could use a mount to stun an enemy, then get off the mount and start attacking, but that takes far longer than just using Overwhelm, because Overwhelm will put you at a great distance to the target. It will put them off the mount, and you can attack right away from a distance. Remember, you get extra damage the further you are away, and this puts you away from the enemy. Then you have Stalker's Mark, which also has Ancestrals. By the way, for Overwhelm you want to make sure to use a Lightning version, because this one is the only one that gets the 80 meters leap. And then you also have Stalker's Mark. It has 3 versions. The Flame version you don't want to use, because this requires you to be in 15 meters range, and this should be one of the first skills you're applying to an enemy, and you don't want to be 15 meters in range when you're attacking. This one has 25 meters and 16%. This one has 35 meters. I personally use this because I can use this skill way before all the other skills. So I'm not wasting time while I'm in range. I can actually apply this before all of the rest. Now, Endless Arrows is mandatory because this makes your blazing arrows apply a bleed, which boosts the second and the third blazing arrow. It boosts the damage from concussive arrow, and it boosts the damage from charge bolt. Wall up we don't want to use because when out of melee. Stealth is very useful because it gives you Bloodthirst. Each stack gives you plus 3% damage. So if you stealth and you wait 10 seconds, you get 10 stacks, which give you plus 30% skill damage for the very first attack. Each attack uses two stacks, so you only have 8 stacks left. So the second attack 8 times 3% is 24% damage. The next one is 18. The next one is 12, I think. Sorry if I did the math wrong, but the very first few hits are basically getting 3 extra damage while you're on stealth. If you spend enough points in Shadowplay, you're also gonna get this one, which will make sure to get faster stacks in stealth. Freerunner should only be used if you're engaging because it's a very long cooldown on only 30 seconds, so 1/3 of the time you have this active. This gives you more movement speed and attack speed. You also have Leech, which I believe is mostly used for PvP in small scale, Throw Dagger, you don't have the melee accuracy. I don't find this reliable at all. It is very powerful, but you need to spec a lot into Shadowplay to get it, and you don't have the melee accuracy, and most of the time this is gonna miss, and it's not gonna apply any of the debuffs. Now, no matter how many points you put into this, you definitely want to make sure you put enough in to get stealth, and if you put enough points into this to get stealth, you're already getting these 3. These are the 3 main reasons, main passives, and what makes Shadowplay so good. This gives you plus 40 attack speed, another 120 attack speed for when landing a critical hit. So Shadowplay alone gives you 40, 120, which is 160, plus 64, so 224, if I did the math correct. So that's a lot of attack speed, and it also gives you evasion rate. And coming over to the last skill tree, which is Songcraft. This has a lot of utility, survivability, but it also boosts your damage by a lot. So let's start with Critical Discord. Critical Discord reduces magic and physical defense. This one has Ancestrals. So all of these Ancestrals, they give minus 15%. They are magic range versions. You actually want to use the melee version because it has minus 30% physical and magic defense. So this makes your target really, really squishy. This is only a 3 second. The other ones are 5 seconds, but your main burst rotation shouldn't be longer than 3 seconds anyways, so you're not benefiting much from the extra 2 seconds. Now, where do you want to use this? You want to use this on every enemy basically, especially on melees and on healers. But on healers you want to make sure that Critical Discord hits before Dissonance, because if you read the description it says Dissonance combos with Discord effect. It basically removes the shield, so if you're discording a healer with a shield and you follow it up with a Dissonance, it is what's called a shield strip. So you're taking away the shield from your healer temporarily for 5 seconds. So the healer does not only get the buff removed from wearing a shield, which is 5% health and I think 250 defense, he will also lose the defense from the shield itself, the Lunar Frost, the synthesizing effects, and the Lunar Gems. I don't think anything in these skill trees will boost your damage on a healer more than shield stripping. This is one of the most important things you want to get used to, is shield stripping healers. You don't ever want to waste your burst on a person who is still wearing his shield if you have the ability. Like even if you don't have the ability, because this is on cooldown, I would much rather wait for these two to go back. Even if I have steady shooting up and triple blazing, I would rather wait until I can shield strip before I waste my burst on someone who's wearing a shield. Now, this is a melee version. No, this is actually a magic version, sorry. But it doesn't matter that we don't have magic accuracy, because the very first passive in Songcraft makes sure that the effects always hit. Sometimes you will see a miss if you use a discord on someone. That only means that the damage has missed, because it also applies magic damage, right? But the effect itself, that they get reduced defense, will always apply when this is active. And you also have Startling Strain, which is really useful for running around, because if you use the live version, you can use it on your mount, and your mount actually gets extra speed from Quickstep. This shouldn't be used though as in PvE or PvP, sorry, for yourself. There's also a version that roots. It is similar to a snare, and it basically charms your target. And then there's also a version which charms your target, and the moment the target dies, the cooldown comes back, so you can use it every time you kill an enemy with it. I think this is mostly used by mages, to be honest, because if you want to charm someone, in my opinion, you should be using Healing Him Stone. This is the only version that makes sense using as an archer. It is basically an AoE charm, so if your raid is asking for more charms, make sure to spec this and throw it in the clumps. This one is really nice, it gives you more movement speed, but honestly, you don't need it in a raid. Personally, I use it because I like the convenience of it. Then you have Dissonance, which you also want to use for the shield strip. Now, you should still use this combo on enemies, but you want to make sure to actually change the rotation. So instead of on a melee, for example, who is a two-hander, who does not wear a shield, you want to make sure Dissonance hits first and then Critical Discord. Because what that does, it reduces the skill damage from the melee player, and it also extends the duration. Remember, the flame version only has 3 seconds. You can actually increase it by another 50%. So make sure to use this first and then Discord for anything that doesn't wear a shield, and for people who wear a shield, use Discord first and then Dissonance. Then you also have Double Time, which is a very nice, well, it's a getaway. It can also be used to engage. If you're too far away from enemy, you already popped all your bursts and you don't want him to run away too far away. Instead of retreating, you can use it aggressively to chase him. You can also use it as an escape. Personally, I use the flame version because if you have archers shooting you or you have damage over time, this will keep resetting. You will basically get the movement speed for as long as you're getting hit. Now, there's also Order, which you don't use. This is only for healers. This one we already talked about. We have Deadly Refrain, which is this one right here. It gives you extra critical damage, which personally I'm not a fan of in PvP because you're hitting crit cap, soft cap anyways. This can be useful for the skill cooldowns on Songcraft, but I find it a real pain in the ass to keep Deadly Refrain actually up and rhythm, so I've stopped using it entirely. You have Bulk Ward, which you don't want to use. You can charm enemies and use Bulk Ward, but for that they have to be in range. If you want to actually charm and remove defense from someone, you need to spec very far in here, so you actually get 25 meters of range. Because if you want to charm someone, this only works if they are in a 10 meter radius around you, which you don't want anyways. Because remember, you get extra damage the further you are away. This is only something mages use because they don't get a penalty for being close. Then you have Sonic Wave, which also the very only option in PvP should be the regular version, because this one makes the people who are you hitting in front of you, they lose all of their targets. You can use that to save a raid member or to save yourself. Obviously you still can get AoE, but you cannot get targeted anymore from that person. There's also other versions, but they should only be used from support players. Then you have Chanty, which personally I'm a big fan of, even if you, I mean, I like the convenience of boosting myself and not being reliable on someone in my raid playing it. If I had to pick one of these, I would always pick Chanty. Most of the time, if you pick any of these two songs, you also want to make sure you spec enough into Songcraft to get this passive, because this will increase the duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. So if you play a song, your entire rotation is going to get damage boosted. If you don't have this passive, by the time you're at the end of your rotation, Bloody Chanty has probably already run off. Then you also have Battle Hymn, which I also like the convenience a lot. Technically you don't need it because it's not your job as an archer to battle hymn your raid, but I like to do it. It's a nice support for your raid. If you have a spare skill point, I would pick this as well, but this also requires you to spec heavily into Songcraft. Now the passives, we already talked about this. This will make sure your effects always hit, these two. Then you also get plus 15 seconds on your songs, which you can ignore. And then you get Zeal. Zeal gives you a critical crease rate. This is very big. This makes sure, because you know the reason this is so nice is because Blazing Arrow always crits, and it's the first hit you get on your target from your main burst rotation, right? So the moment you start your rotation, you're getting plus 30% increased crit rate. So everything that you follow up with is gonna get crit rated as well, and critical hit. And you also have Deadly Refrain, which I talked about, and this one. This one is useless. You don't want to spec too much into Songcraft to get this one. Yeah, I think that's about it from all of the skills. Okay, so I just showed you the base combo, and we kept adding more skills to it to increase the damage. I have a spreadsheet here where I wrote up all of the damage numbers, and we also have a percentage increase next to it, so we can actually visualize what has the highest impact on our damage, which we can use to figure out what we should be prioritizing in our burst combo. We can figure out what is less meaningful, what has the highest impact, what should we be prioritizing. So we start off with a basic combo. We did one Blazing Arrow for 14.5k damage, we did one Concussive and one Charged Bolt for almost 21k each. Now the first skill we added was Steady Shooting. Steady Shooting gives us plus 56% critical damage, which translated in 15% more damage for all three skills. it also gave us a second and a third blazing arrow. Now we applied Stalker's Mark. Stalker's Mark, compared to the previous one, did a 13% increase. That is because we used the version which gives 13% increased range damage, or received range damage. And now it gets interesting. Now the combo effects start applying. If you hit a target with Blazing Arrow that is Stalker's Marked, it applies a bleed. Blazing Arrow also gets extra damage from the bleeding, which means the second and third Blazing Arrow now hit a bleeding target, so they do extra damage. You can see this is a 43% increase in damage. That is one of the highest increases that we're going to get. This tells us you don't want to Blazing Arrow anyone without applying Stalker's Mark, because you're missing out on a lot of damage, and it gets even higher. Concussive doesn't show an increase from the bleeding, even though it has defense penetration from hitting bleeding targets. It only got the 13% from Stalker's Mark. That is because the dummy we were hitting does not have defensive stats, so there's nothing to penetrate. But we went to Prairie, we did it on an elephant. We did a base concussive for 10,000. We applied the bleed and the concussive hit for 36% more. So this value right here should be much higher. And in PvP on players, this is going to be much higher. So the bleeding tremendously increases the second and third Blazing Arrow, your concussive arrow, and as you can see, mostly the charge bolt. It's a 62% increase in damage. You get a 13% from received range damage from Stalker's Mark, and you get a plus 47% increased damage from the bleeding. So you never wanna triple blazing, concussive, charged an enemy that isn't Stalker's Mark before. You should much rather wait for Stalker's Mark to come back, so you can always use it. You don't want to do this. This should be your base combo. Steady shooting, Stalker's Mark. If you don't have these two up, you shouldn't be bursting anyone. Now, the next thing we add is Discord. As you can see, Discord also has 0 effect, because it applies minus 30% defense, which our dummy doesn't have, so there's nothing to reduce. But we went back to Prairie, to the elephants. We did a base charge bolt of 8.8k. Then we applied Deadeye, which gives us 3000 defense penetration. That translates to actually 12% more damage. Then we shot the elephant with a Discord, and that translated to 14,700. That's a 66% increase in damage, so this is huge. This is the highest increase we get in damage. So what this really tells us is, you don't want to hit anything that's not Stalker's Marked. You don't want to hit anything that's not discorded. You should always prioritize these skills. You don't want to waste your full burst on something that is not Stalker's Marked or discorded. Now we also have Chant here, which you can throw in, which gives us 14 to 18%, because if you read the skill description, the longer the song plays, the higher the effects become. So it starts low, it gets higher. This is also a very big increase. Similar is Stealth, just that Stealth has very little effect on the end of the combo, because we start our Stealth stacks with 10 stacks, right? The first hit we get is Discord, so this takes up 2 stacks. We're left with 8 stacks, 8 times 3 plus 24% skill damage. So this is what gets applied to the very first Blazing Arrow. The second and third only get 18 and 12% skill damage, and this only gets 6, and this gets nothing. So basically these 2 skills are unaffected in our combo from the star stacks, because they have already been used up from Stalker's Mark, from Blazing Arrow and from the critical Discord. But this is also a very good increase. Especially if you don't feel like you're being targeted a lot in raids, I would very much recommend engaging with star stacks. If you feel like someone really wants to have you dead and you're the first one he's targeting, then I would keep my stealth to use it in the fight. Then we also have the height advantage. I will show you a picture of some guys who data mined. There's actually a hidden, I would call it a hidden passive, which is a height damage boost. So as you can see, the higher you are to your enemy, the more damage gets applied. For our case, and the elevation we had from jumping on the house, it was 13 to 20%. It doesn't matter if the target, it's not a height difference, so if someone is above you, it doesn't get applied, you don't do much more damage. But if someone is below you, you definitely do much more damage. You should always try to utilize the high ground. For example, Maynard Glen and Sun Gold fields. If you're fighting on the hills, you should always be trying to be above the enemy rate, so you're benefiting from extra damage. And then you also have Berserk. You can see Berserk says 25% skill damage. This is similar to Stealth, which gives you 30%. Honestly, this is a very little increase in my opinion, considering it also lets you get 75% increased damage. It makes you really, really squishy. So you really should only be using Berserk Nodachi if you're trying to kill something which you wouldn't be killing without it. Now overall, we can say you always want to apply Stalker's Mark because you need to benefit from the bleeding extra damage, and you also want to discard everything you can.